Welcome back to the Hoof. Anthony, Eric, what's going on, everybody? Today we're talking about the NFC East. We got the Dallas Cowboys at plus 140. This is the best odds for the NFC East, Anthony. Plus 140 for the Cowboys.
Yeah, it's probably where everybody predicts they would be right at this point in the year. They won the division last year. They swept the division last year. Clearly the favorites right now. This number, doesn't give you much wiggle room for high return on your bet by any means, plus 140. But we're going to go through this division and see that the division is kind of wide open. The NFC East, known probably as the weakest division in all of football, and still consistently that, I think, this season as well. So the Cowboys being the favorite, no surprise here. Is it the bet I'm most excited about? Not exactly, because even if I'm confident in the Cowboys, which at this point I am not, there isn't a lot of high return here. So probably not the bet I'm taking in this.
Right. I think a lot of this is from their performance last season. Dallas Cowboys had a great year, won 12 games, lost in the playoffs, but they did win the division. So I think a lot of hype coming out from last year. But the big thing is, can they get over the hump this year? Can they win a playoff game? I mean, Dak Prescott looks very healthy, had a full offseason. Didn't hear his name one time, so that's all. No distraction. That's...
Yeah, I think the big thing with him,
dude's had a ton of distraction. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing with him is the contract. Now we know he's going to be in Dallas. He settled all that. That was the talk all last year, and he had to deal with that. But now they paid him, and so it's his job to show he can do it at this level consistently now and be the guy for this team to push the team forward and do exactly what it says at the bottom of our screen here. Get over the hump and win a playoff game. You're the Dallas Cowboys. You're supposed to be, quote unquote, America's team, and you can't get out of the divisional round of the playoffs. So Dallas has to show something here and put it together and show that they can win playoff games consistently. Again, I don't know that I'm confident in that. The NFC is somewhat more open this year when it comes to the teams making the playoffs. You talk about the stacked AFC and what's going to happen there, but there's not a lot going on in the NFC in terms of pure dominant teams and who's expected to go all the way. Obviously, the Rams coming back as champs, but is there wiggle room there for the Cowboys? Sure. And when they get to the playoffs, can they be the team to make a run? Yes, but they have to show it, because at this point, there's nothing in the record for me to feel confident to bet on this team and the leadership of this team to press forward. So at this point, I don't know that I'm taking that bet either.
Right. You mentioned their playoff drought. They haven't advanced past the divisional round since 1995. However, last year, they're first in the league in points per game with 31.2. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot to say about that. I think, as we've talked about, the injuries are going to kill them. Tyron Smith now injured. Receiving core beat up a little bit. But you really got to focus to lead the league in points per game. You got to have good offensive weapons. And I think they're maybe lacking that in the receiving core. But again, Zeke Elliott, along with Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard had, more carries than Zeke Elliott last year in half the games. But I think that 1-2 punch is promising for them. Zeke starts every single game last season, which I think is huge. And, moving over to the receiving core, what do you think about the receivers?
Yeah, it's funny. We led with talking about Dak Prescott, the $50 million man. And, when you think about this Dallas Cowboys team offensively, my mind goes to the running backs, Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott being kind of a two-headed monster there. That was a very good combination last year where, if you ask me, Pollard was probably the better of the two even. And now this year, that same unit is going out there in terms of the running backs, whereas they have had a lot of change on the wide receiver side of things, right? Amari Cooper shipped off to Cleveland in the trade there, and you lose presumably who was your number one guy. CeeDee Lamb now steps into that number one position. CeeDee had a great year last year, but again, it was when he had Amari Cooper next to him. Can he now be the definitive, you're the guy on this offense? And the rest of the weapons on this team, when they're healthy, they look pretty decent, right? They have a good passing game. Michael Gallup is somebody who I like for this team, and to be kind of that security blanket when CeeDee is double covered that Dak can go to. But with those two having their own questionable injuries, it gets pretty thin after that. You're talking Jalen Tolbert, a rookie, being in there as your third wide receiver. They had good depth in James Washington, who dealt with an injury. And the names after that, Noah Brown, Dennis Houston, these aren't exactly guys who you're expecting to flash on the field when they're there. So Dak is going to have his hands full trying to navigate the injuries to this wide receiver room early in the season, especially.
Yeah, I'd say Dak and Kellen Moore. I got a lot of faith in Kellen Moore. I think he could
the offensive coordinator.
Plays. Yeah, offensive coordinator, correct. I love CeeDee Lamb with his physical ability. Should be able to take a step. I just worry that maybe he's the focus point of the defense. They're going to scheme against him. And what else do you have? I mean, I'd like to see Michael Gallup come back. I think he was playing lights out before he got injured. Expected to be back between weeks 1 and 4. If he can get back to full speed, I think they are a threat in the passing game. If he doesn't, I think they're in big trouble there.
Right,
offensive
and then they're going to
mentioned as well.
They're going to start relying more on that running game. And when you think about the Cowboys as well, over the past decade, probably they've had one of the best offensive lines in all of football. And as you said, now they're dealing with injuries on that line and changes to that line that has been consistently good, and we think of as consistently good. Now there's some question marks there, and that can affect, obviously, that run game that you've established, as well as having these injuries to the wide receiver room. Now that creates this big question mark on offense of what is your identity, especially early in the year with these injuries. I think there's no question that once CeeDee is healthy and you have Michael Gallup and Dak is in his form, you're going to be a passing offense that dominates and puts points up that can also run the ball, right? Even the passes to the running backs are going to be a big part of this offense. But at this point, Dallas has some big question marks entering the season.
For sure. With that, the Cowboys swept the division last year. They beat everybody in their division twice. Now that's not an easy feat. I know the division was down last year. The teams weren't as good, but I mean, that tells me something about this team. I think they are resilient. They were playing lights out last season, had a great regular season as they normally do, it seems like. But none of that matters until you win a playoff game, right?
That's right.
I think Dallas's bigger challenge this year is getting to the playoffs. I don't think it's going to be as easy as last year as it was last year. But I think the biggest hurdle for them, can you get to the playoffs? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be in the playoffs. I think they're good enough to be a playoff team, but this division is more competitive. I'll put it that way. Better in terms of the teams and where they stood last year and how things worked out, where Dallas was kind of handed it, basically. Easy division, easily beat their divisional opponents, swept them. I'm not sure that happens this year. You've got competitive teams. The Giants and the Commanders want to beat them. Philly, as we'll talk about in a minute here, is primed to beat them, and that's what they built for. And we didn't talk about this Cowboys defense, which last year gave up a lot of yards, had a lot of interceptions, made the big plays when they needed to, certainly flashed. But it's a question of what does the defense do against their divisional opponents in order to sweep the division as well? If you can't rely on your offense, especially like we said early in the year, what is that defense going to do? And yeah, you pulled up the next graphic that we had. I'm sorry I carried over into that, but Cowboys defense, will they improve this season? Well, they've got a lot of question marks. They've got excellent player in like Micah Parsons, who came on last year.
True superstar, correct.
Yes, I truly believe in him. And then you've got a guy like Trayvon Diggs who made the flash plays, the interceptions, but the knock on him, especially in this preseason, is he's been going after the ball a little too much. And then he's been able to give up, because he's going after the ball, he gives up a lot of big plays, and that is the worry for this Cowboys defense, that in going after the ball, when he swings and misses, he's left an open lane for a receiver or whoever he's guarding to make a big play. And I think his divisional opponents are going to be the most prepared to do that.
Right, I've heard that about him before. He allows a lot of separation, but then he's a playmaker, having that receiver background. It'll be interesting to see if teams, scheme towards Trayvon Diggs this year. It'd be really smart not to. Cowboys were top 3 in turnovers and takeaways last season. I think that matters. I think the league's on notice. Hey, I would not try Trayvon Diggs. I think they take a more conservative approach when it comes to him. Because you can't get 11 interceptions without people throwing the ball towards you, right?
Yes, that's right.
So
He's certainly had his opportunities as a rookie, right? So that's probably a lot to do with it. Maybe the teams will now err on the other side of the ball and go away from his direction, but he's still going to have his shots to make plays for sure.
Right, yeah, I agree with that. And then we just want to touch on, last season didn't end great, kind of, blew the last chance. They did have one more opportunity to get the ball in the end zone in that playoff game and just came up a little short. So now do you think that has a sour taste coming into this season, or is that more motivation? Do you think that the Cowboys start hot?
Yeah, I don't think the Cowboys start hot this year, but I think that's more to do with their injuries. I think that bad playoff loss taste in your mouth comes back once the playoffs are back again, right? That's when this team is going to say, you know what, we were here last year and we got to remember what happened to us last year. And we got to be more mentally prepared and tough to overcome what beat us in the last game, which was really ourselves, right? And that has been the question of a Mike McCarthy-led team for a long time now, consistently. And I, again, probably am a believer in the product that he's shown us so far, right? You have to prove to me you can beat it before I'm going to bet on you to beat it, right? So that's where I'm at with that. I do think the fans have a right to be upset, right? They're not happy because the ending was very heartbreaking and disappointing for a team that was so dominant on offense and scored all these points, as we said, and had these flashy defensive plays and could really play in competitive and, fun to watch games all year long.
For sure. Yeah, let's go. Dallas is over under on the seasons at 10.5. Let's go ahead and bring up their schedule. What do you take here? 10.5 for Dallas. Won 12 last year.
They did win 12 games last year. We've already talked about, and we will expand on how this division has changed since last year. And you look to the start of their season, Tampa Bay and Cincinnati. We just talked about the injuries they have. You're coming out against the team that was in the Super Bowl and a team that many picked to win the Super Bowl. That's not a great start for the Dallas Cowboys. I think they do start the year 0-2, and then they get a few wins in there, but then they have the Rams. The Eagles are more competitive. I, right now, am at about 10 wins for the Cowboys, which would put me at the under. So if I'm betting this, and I actually like this bet, I'm taking the under 10 wins, or under 10.5 for the Dallas Cowboys. It's pretty close. Vegas knows what they're doing, obviously, with these numbers. So, of course, you're going to be like, okay, it could be 10 or 11 wins. That's right where I have the Cowboys. But my bet right now is on 10 wins. So I'm taking the under for the Dallas Cowboys win total.
Yeah, and I'm going to go about 8 or 9 wins. Again, we talked about them sweeping the division last season. I don't think that can happen twice. Dallas has been decimated by injuries. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see some more people step up in place of those stars like Tyrone Smith. We'd hope Tyler Smith would step up. Like to see Michael Gallup come back, but a lot of that remains to be unseen. So I'm going to go with 8 or 9 wins. I still think they're a good team, solid on defense, great quarterback, great offensive coordinator. I think that's enough alone to get you 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. So both taking the under on that one.
And as we said, when it comes to the playoffs, it's a totally new season, but they have to show me in the playoffs. And I'm sure we'll get to talk about that a lot more come January.
For sure. Let's move on to Philadelphia. We had Dallas at plus 140. Now moving on to Philadelphia at plus 150. Seems to be neck and neck.
Right. This has definitely leveled off over time, right? The Dallas was the runaway favorite since they, were the easy winners last year. They swept the division. They made it look easy. They scored a lot of points versus the division. But Philadelphia now has said, you know what? We didn't like losing to the Dallas Cowboys that way. And we're going to make the improvements on our team based on how to win this division. And I think that's exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles did in building their current roster with the changes that they made. So I actually do like this bet for the Philadelphia Eagles to win the NFC East at plus 150. Again, not a huge payout because it's close between, the top two teams here, Dallas and Philly. But my bet would be on Philly. Slightly better return, plus 150 to the plus 140. So, yes, I'm taking this bet. This is the team that I think wins this division.
Right. I like Philly as well. Getting into some of the details, they add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think that's a big pickup for them. Comes over from New Orleans. And just adding to that secondary, you had Darius Slay, who's been playing really well in Philadelphia. You got Jordan Davis to match up with Fletcher Cox on the defensive line.
Yes.
I mean, I just see talent all over the place. Nakobe Dean comes in, remains to be seen, but you would think with, drafted so high, playing at a top school in the SEC, I think he would contribute right away. So I think there's a lot of things to like about Philly's defense. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson comes over. I think that just adds to that. But the big question with Philadelphia really does come down to Jalen Hurts, right? Can he become an above-average quarterback? I'd say right now, a lot of things to like about him. Like we talked about, 16 passing touchdowns, 10 more rushing, almost had 1,000 yards rushing. He was 784, so about 800 yards rushing last year. Kind of a, I want to say, exotic scheme. I think they're scheming him the right way, playing to his strengths. That's what you got to do with a guy like Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, exactly. I think the big thing with Jalen Hurts for me is he has the passion for the game. He is dedicated. He's a hard worker. You can see it on the field. He's fun to watch, right? But can he be the guy, the franchise quarterback to take this team to a Super Bowl and over the hump? Maybe, but I'm not sure I'm there yet. I'm not quite sold on Jalen Hurts being the guy. And part of that is just because in today's NFL, you need an X factor quarterback, right? It's all revolves around the quarterback to be that dominant team and that favorite team every year, right? Cowboys have their guy in Dak, other teams around the NFL that we could name. But is Jalen Hurts elite enough to be considered one of those guys? Certainly hasn't shown that to this point. I do like him and I do root for him, but that doesn't mean I'm betting on him to be that kind of quarterback to take that team. That being said, we're going to talk about how this offense is built around him. You mentioned it, that they play to Jalen Hurts' scheme, that he has the weapons he needs to succeed. And I think that can be what puts this team over the hump.
Right.
So they're going to have a decision to make when it comes to if the Eagles do win the division this year, as I'm picking them to, then how does that translate to what you do building for the future now?
Right. And I think one thing to mention with Jalen Hurts is he did lead this team to the playoffs, gets lots of credit for that. Did not play well against that Tampa Bay defense, who was very talented. So, look, everyone has bad games. I have concerns. Will teams figure out Jalen Hurts? Will they make him one-dimensional? There's a lot of film out there on him now. We've had a full off season. Can he continue the upward trajectory? Statistically, or was quarterback rating, and really, can he lead this team to the playoffs? Big questions there. Remains to be seen. It's so fun to watch. That's why I'm a huge football fan.
Absolutely, and he's entertaining, so he makes it even better.
For sure. All right, rolling over to this receiving core. Got to talk about A.J. Brown coming over from the Tennessee Titans. One of the most shocking trades of the offseason. Many shocking trades this offseason, but A.J. Brown probably the most shocking. This is got to be top 5 receiver in the league, right? Comes over, helps out Jalen Hurts' development, helps out this offense. He'll get a lot of attention from defenses. I personally think Devontae Smith benefits more because I think teams will focus on A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith will get one-on-ones versus maybe being doubled in the past. And we know how silky smooth he is, so I expect a big year from Devontae Smith. Last year, he's the leading receiver, 916 yards. But A.J. Brown, what do you think about his impact on this team?
Yeah, this is a huge move for the Philadelphia Eagles, and obviously we knew that when they made it on draft night. They're saying, hey, we need somebody who is a number 1 receiver in the league right now to take us to that next level. And that's what they did. They went out and got their guy in A.J. Brown. They invested in him. They paid him what he wanted. And now next to him, they've got Devontae Smith, who emerged last season and is a young, growing wide receiver who's going to have a hell of a lot more opportunities now that there's attention on A.J. Brown next to him. And I think that carries over to this entire wide receiver core. Jalen Reagor is there for now. There's been questions about, will he be the guy in Philly? Will they trade him? Whatever it may be. And even if they do, whoever ends up being that third wide receiver for them is going to get opportunities as well underneath. And let's not forget one of my favorite targets that they have, Dallas Goedert, the tight end, who has, consistently been great for them over the last few years. And I think will continue to be one of their leading receivers next to Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So certainly the weapons are there for this team to succeed. And again, running that offense to your quarterback is such a key thing in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens do that very well with their quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles are following that same mold. Let's make our offense fit the quarterback we have right now. And I believe in this team to actually improve on what they've done and take that next step forward.
For sure. And, with Miles Sanders, also a big threat there, ran the ball well last season.
Yes.
The offensive line, I think, is one of the better units in the league. And we didn't even mention Dallas Goedert, right? Big weapon.
Yes, yeah.
So Jalen Hurts has all the weapons. I think the way they schemed up the offense last season, I think it does fit his style.
And at running back, they use Scott. They use their depth. They have Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, it's running back, their wide receivers. This team is just well organized on offense to make plays. And Jalen Hurts can hurt you with his legs as well, as we know. So certainly a team that if you're looking at the roster alone, the offensive roster alone, we haven't talked about the defense much, but the offensive roster alone, I think is better than what the Dallas Cowboys are putting out there right now in terms of well-rounded offensive injuries. We talked about the injuries to the Dallas offensive line. I certainly think that this team is poised to take the division.
Right, and we talked about Philly and Dallas. The big question, I love Dallas's passing game. I'm just not sure who could step up, but if I would choose the passing game over the run game, and I think Philly's much better at running with the quarterback, running with Miles Sanders. So having
three-headed monster.
Yeah. If I'm Dallas, I'm going to try to run the ball a little more because of the injuries to my receiving core. Philly, Dallas, neck and neck. I like Philly as well. But let's go 9.5 wins for Philly. Second in the division last season. They won 9 games. So right at that 9.5.
Well, if you're paying attention, I did have the Dallas Cowboys right at 10 wins, which was under their win total. And I said Philly's going to win the division. So guess what? I'm very much over the 9.5 wins for the Philadelphia Eagles this season. This is one of my favorite bets here in this division. I definitely think the Philly's going to get over that 9.5 hump. We talked all about the offense and how they're built. Jalen Hurts has to show he can do it with these weapons. But he did a little bit last year, and I think the team got better. So by nature of that, they should improve. And the defense, you mentioned it at the beginning, but they have this excellent balance now, I think, of young guns and older veteran players, right? The Fletcher Coxes and right. Darius Slay. I mean, they're just from top to bottom.
Didn't even talk about James Bradbury coming in.
Yes, the huge trade for a cornerback, James Bradbury.
Great offseason.
Yeah, they really, really did. And even in the draft, right? You mentioned one of my favorite players in the draft this year, Nakobe Dean, just an absolute ball monster, great tackler. I love the kid. So I think he's going to be great for this team, even if he isn't, on the field for 90% of the snaps or a starter or whatever you want to say. He adds great depth to this team. Jordan Davis, their number 1 overall pick or first round pick as well. He is also a player who, is expected to be long-term in his career. An awesome dominant player in the NFL. So I hope he lives up to that as well. But certainly, again, that balance of young and old, you have the veterans who are still crafty enough to play the position and do well at the position and still hold that starting job, mentoring those young guys. It's an excellent balance to have on a winning team, and they are certainly building that winning culture. I'm all the way over the 9.5 wins. So here's that schedule as well.
Right, so let's pull up the schedule here. And you said 9. So
I said 10. Over. I'm going. Yes, I'm going. Actually, I believe they'll get 11. Is my total, but I'm over the 9.5 for sure.
Okay, yeah. We'll start out with Detroit, Minnesota, Washington, Jacksonville. I mean, you could be 4-0 here. Minnesota, I think, is better than they were last year. That'd be a tough game.
Certainly, that's the first challenge there for them. I think.
Yeah, but I don't see a spot in the schedule where things get really tough. I think the toughest spot would probably be that Colts. Week 11, week 12, week 13, you got the Colts, Green Bay, and Tennessee.
And it helps that 2 of those games are home, right? Green Bay and Tennessee.
Home, but that's probably the most difficult stretch in their whole schedule, which tells me it's relatively simple compared to other teams.
Right. And compared to the teams in their division, really. So that's why, I mean, between the schedule and what they've done, the Eagles are going to emerge in the NFC this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I'm going to go over as well, but I'm going to go 10 wins. not going to go 12.
Fair enough. It's still the over, though. Again, This is one of my favorite bets, people. I would jump all over this one. Over for the Eagles win total.
All right. Heard it from the man. There is two other teams in this division, if you're paying attention. Let's move on to the newly appointed Washington Commanders, who were just a football team last year.
That's right.
Plus 500. So pretty significant gap from 150, 140 to plus 500.
Certainly. A better payout if you're looking for the shocking outcome, right? So here, the Washington Commanders at plus 500, not expected to win the division, especially with teams like Philly and Dallas, who we spent a good time talking about here. The Commanders, they're an interesting team, certainly haven't lived up to expectations in terms of their defense, had some issues on offense. I like the plus 500 line here. If you believe in the Washington Commanders and say, I don't know that I believe in the Eagles because of their questionable quarterback or whatever, and, the Cowboys dealing with their injuries is going to give the Commanders the opportunity to take charge and win this division. That's not a completely outlandish thing to say in my mind. So being plus 500, it doesn't scare me away from this bet. It's just not a bet I'm taking because I do believe in the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you even slightly believe that the Eagles are not going to emerge as dominant, then you could take this bet and it could pay off well with a line like plus 500.
Right. They win 7 games last season, finished third in the division, 7-10. As we mentioned with the injuries, Chase Young, Brian Fitzpatrick, you have a backup quarterback in there, distractions here, distractions there. I think winning 7 games is a credit to Ron Rivera. Disciplined coach, gets the players motivated. It's hard to win 7 games with a backup quarterback and your superstar first-round pick is hurt. So, but now we have Carson Wentz here. So, always a fun topic to talk about Carson Wentz. Definitely an upgrade at quarterback for the Washington Commanders. They bring in Sam Howell as insurance because, if you look at Carson Wentz's past, for some reason, teams love to just move on from him. And I'm not real sure what's going on there. From the outside looking in, I like Carson Wentz as a quarterback. I think he's one of the more athletic, well-rounded quarterbacks in the league. Just hasn't been able to put it together schematically, maybe. Maybe tries to do a little too much. Seems to be out of sync with some of the offensive coordinators he's had, Frank Reich in general, for the most part. But definitely an upgrade for the Commanders here.
Yeah, it's not hard to upgrade from Tyler Heineke in a sense. Now, Heineke did a good job last year. There's no doubt about what he did with the team he had. But, Wentz has a better upside, has a higher ceiling than a Tyler Heineke. But what we've seen over Wentz in the last couple of seasons is insanely mediocre at this point, right? So, again, that's why I'm not a huge believer in this team with Wentz at the helm. Should they be better? Yes, I think that should be the expectation. They should be better than last year. But is he the guy, just as we talked about with Jalen Hurts, who has to prove that he has that star power? We've seen Wentz play at an MVP caliber level when he was with Philadelphia before his injury. And again, injury being a concern with him as well, which is why you bring in, a young gun you trust in Sam Howell, should you need to. Or if Carson Wentz just falls on his face and doesn't do well, like you said, for some reason, going to new teams, having another opportunity hasn't seemed to revitalize him in ways it would other people that have his same potential. So we'll see what happens at quarterback here, right. But certainly an upgrade, certainly better for this team, a better leader. He knows, how to lead when he's on the field. It looks like he can command the team pretty well. Right. It's just a matter of results.
Yeah, and I like the weapons that the Commanders have. McLaurin, yes. Top receiver, I think, top 10. You got Logan Thomas. I do like the run game on Antonio Gibson mixed in with J.D. McKissick. There's something there. Are they going to win more than 10 games? Are they, are they in the conversation to win the division? I would be completely shocked if they were in that conversation, to be honest. But I'm not going to get carried away and say it can never happen because I do trust Ron Rivera. His record speaks for itself. And this team, I do think with their defensive line, Chase Young, Deron Payne, if they could put it all together, they could really be a big threat, or maybe the top defensive line in football. Now, I know Chase Young's injured. It's going to be a while before he comes back. He tore his ACL last season. He was sidelined. He's going to be sidelined into the season. But yeah, they had a lot of hype last season, but just couldn't put it together. So far, we have not seen them live up to expectations.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about elite names up and down in terms of where they were drafted, right? Deron Payne, you mentioned Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat. These are all top 10 picks for them, first-round picks. Chase Young, unfortunately, with the injury, but when he comes back, they also added F.A. Obata as depth, who I like. They drafted another lineman, Fedarian Mathis, this year. So the defense is stacked in a way that should compete, especially with the teams, who they can go after Dak Prescott in that run game that we talked about. Philly, we said, also likes to run the ball and be balanced and has a running quarterback. They should have the line that can contain and deal with that, because these guys are pure athletes being picked in the top 10 of the NFL draft because of their upside and abilities. They just have to prove that they can do it. And I think part of that is coaching as well. The coaches have to get out of them what they're capable of doing and help them live up to that potential. And I think this team, so you said something that I wouldn't say, in the fact that I would be completely shocked if the Commanders won this division. This is still the NFC East, so pump the brakes, I would say. With a plus 500 line, I still like that bet, because this is the NFC East and you never know what's going to happen. And the Commanders are still, you look at this roster, and it's a well put together roster. We mentioned the offense: Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick. They've got Terry McLaurin. They drafted Jahan Dotson, who has had a phenomenal preseason and looks like he's going to have high upside. Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas. This offense looks really good. The question mark is the quarterback in Carson Wentz, right? And that point, and maybe some of the offensive line as well. But this defense should be dominant, and it's a question mark as to why they haven't been able to live up to that. And we didn't even talk about the backside of the defense. Kendall Fuller, Jamin Davis, they still have guys who, were drafted high and should live up to their potential.
For sure. But another thing that would add to the shock if they won the division is the NFL versus Dan Snyder, right? And I got it. Maybe the team's mostly separate from ownership, but distraction. We got sexual assault accusations. We got culture issues. I don't see this team being able to hold it all together for the entire season, right? Star player and Chase Young's out. Got a new quarterback coming in. I just don't see it this year, but I do like what they're building. I think the foundation is there. I just don't like anything over 7 wins, to be honest. But that leads us to our Washington over and under, which is at 7. So, what you got for 7? I'm sorry, 7.5. 7.5.
7.5. So pull up the schedule here, and I'll show you what I mean here. The Commanders, as I said, are a team that I think could win games. They're going to be more competitive than people expect, I think, coming in. And a lot of that is just because they're coming off a bad season where injuries plagued them and they had so many distractions. The distractions are going to affect this team. There's no doubt about it. Dan Snyder needs to be kicked out of the NFL, and this whole franchise will be in a better direction. And when that happens, whether it's 3 years from now or sometime during the season or whatever else happens, they at least have the players, the roster in place, the coach in place, and Ron Rivera, who can stabilize this organization and hopefully move forward. But when you bring in a new owner, sometimes they like to go their completely own direction too. So that's going to be questionable. But looking at this schedule and thinking about winnable games, look at the start of the schedule. Jacksonville and Detroit, I think, are both winnable games for this Commanders team. They're both more competitive this season as well, but winnable games for Commanders. Eagles and Dallas, we talked about, tough games, tough lineup. Tennessee, Chicago. These are all going to be tough games for the Commanders. There's no stretch here where I'm like, oh, okay, there's an easy stretch where they can win 5 games, or maybe they'll lose this game and then come back and win 2. 7 is a tough number. I think I'm right at 7 for this team. And it's tough for me. I probably will not bet the over-under for the Commanders, because it would not surprise me if they won 8 games. But I'm at 7. So if I'm being forced, I'm taking the under 7.5. I'm going 7. But it is close for this one for me.
Yeah, I think it's close too, but I'm going to say under 7. I just don't like, the offense versus some of these up-and-coming teams, like especially Philadelphia and Dallas. It's going to be tough for the Commanders to beat them. Maybe they do win one of three, but I mean, those are tough games for them. You got Green Bay on here, Tennessee. I just think there's some of these teams that are building are in better positions that they have to face. I think the Giants maybe will split with them. They're both in similar situations. The Giants are starting to get a good, solid foundation there to compete in the division. It really comes down to, can the Commanders hold on for the season, right, without collapsing, right? Because it's just tough to play when everyone's doubting you, and your star players being injured, your quarterbacks,
and the quality of that
performing the way
that field. They have a history of injuries for a reason, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So, yeah, that could also affect this team. You're expecting that they're most probably going to have injuries come down, as bad as that is to say. I'm not wishing injury upon them. I'm saying that their field conditions are part of the reason why they have so many injuries and have this history, and the field isn't getting any better. So yeah, that is something they're going to have to manage as well. 7 is such a tough number, but yeah, I'm with you. That 7.5, I'm under. I'm right at about 7. They can beat it, but I'm under.
Yeah, they could take the under as well. Okay, so we have one more team in this division, and this is a very fun topic. The New York Giants plus 750. Another big gap between 500 and 750. The Commanders and the Giants. The Giants are very interesting to me because they could go either way, right? We could see the resurgence of this team finally. They get their feet underneath them and start to put something together. Or we could see kind of the same old thing. New coach, right? First year, quarterback's not playing well. It could go either way. But last year's won 4 games, and they are at 7.5 as well this year. But what do you think about the Giants at 750?
Oh boy, 750 is a number that is high for the odds here, right? That's plus 750 is certainly screaming, take this bet and you'll pay off a lot, right? But it's 750 for a reason. The New York Giants are what we know they are. They're rebuilding. This is not the team that they think is going to compete for playoffs and make a Super Bowl run, no matter what anybody on that team tells you this year, no matter what anybody in that front office tells you this year. They are not competing for a Super Bowl this season. They are rebuilding. They are trying to make it. And the way this team is built, a couple of things we're going to talk about in a minute here. Is this quarterback their quarterback of the future, or is this a lame duck season for Danny Dimes in this offense? Saquon Barkley, is he going to be with the Giants at all in the future plans? Is he still elite, which is our next topic here, right? And some of the rest of this, they're wide receivers. There's a lot of questions around this team. So I am not taking this bet, even though it's plus 750, because I think, they are going to finish where their record says they should be, or where their rebuild status says they should be.
Right.
And that starts with Saquon Barkley, right? Is he going to be a bust? They could win a few games. I do expect the Giants to win games they're supposed to lose. In other words, games they're not favored in, or even not favored by 10 points, that they could win because they have some talent around them and they have that ability to make flash plays. They could win some of those games. And part of that's going to be the health of Saquon Barkley. And can he do it? He has to show that he can rebound from the injury, right?
I think, we've seen the injury, right? But I think this season, he has so much expectation, right? He's the highest drafted running back since Reggie Bush in 2006. I mean, he had 2,000 all-purpose yards as a rookie, won Rookie of the Year. I mean, the guy is just filled with potential, and I think people are just waiting to see that still. Like, we want to see this guy, blow the top off, lead the team. But it's interesting to think about because he didn't have a 100-yard rushing game last year. He had actually one versus Chicago in garbage time. They lost 29-3. So, I mean, when you talk about Saquon Barkley, it's just he's kind of set up for failure at this point. It's going to be very hard for him to carry a team and have 2,000 all-purpose yards. But that's the expectation that he has because he was drafted so high, because he is probably the most physically gifted running back in the league. Good argument for that. So I think, that comes with the territory. When Derrick Henry's running for 2,000 yards a season, you got to be in that conversation. But maybe he doesn't get as many carries because of the injuries. What do you think about Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, this is the year for him to prove if he's going to stay in the NFL and be a presence in the NFL. I don't know that he can return to complete form that he was in his rookie year after these injuries. He has to show he can rebound and be that guy. And even if he is a 2,000-yard guy or something this season, are the Giants going to retain him? I'm not sure there, but maybe another team will take him and turn him into that weapon that we saw he has the potential to be from his rookie season. The big question here is the offensive line he's dealing with, right? The same thing with Daniel Jones at quarterback. They've dealt with coaching changes. They've dealt with regime changes. They've dealt with offensive lines that have been horrible. And now the Giants have drafted in the top 5 or top 10. I think the first one was 7, Andrew Thomas. Left tackle and right tackle drafted top 10 guys in the NFL draft. These guys should be your anchors at right and left tackle at this point. But the interior line leaves a little bit to be questioned, starting with, for me, John Feliciano, who was a backup guard for the Bills last season and now is your starting center. Maybe he's better at center, but should he be, your best option at center? I'm not sure. I'm sold there, and there's some question there. And that could affect what Saquon is able to do and also what the quarterback is able to do, obviously.
Right. Andrew Thomas is drafted 4th overall.
4th, so they were both top 10, yeah.
Both top 10. I mean, the Giants have had a lot of picks in the top 5, really. But yeah, I like what you said about the offensive line. There's something there with Evan Neal being added to the mix.
Yes.
I do think that these are going to be good tackles in the league, right? And Saquon Barkley really hasn't had the consistency with that. I don't think he's had a good offensive line since he was drafted in 2018. It's like his 3rd coach or something like that. I mean, Joe Judge coming over from a special teams coordinator to head coach. I mean, Ben McAdoo, could talk about that if we'd like, but I finally do think he has a coach that's going to benefit him, and that's going to be fun to watch. And it just remains to be seen if Brian Daboll can get him more involved, use the Saquon Barkley's strengths to move the ball. Right, take the pressure off Daniel Jones and utilize Saquon Barkley. So that'll be fun to watch. But speaking of Daniel Jones, let's get on this topic real quick because this is another hot topic for the Giants. Does Daniel Jones stay in New York? They declined his 5th-year option for $22.38 million, and not a good sign. I mean, anytime you decline an option for a potential franchise quarterback, a quarterback you took in the top 10. That's very telling. The writing's on the wall, in my opinion. And I think personally, at this point, let's say Daniel Jones comes out and has 5,000 passing yards. And oh my God, Brian Daboll is the most amazing thing. He saved Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is the next Josh Allen. I still think Daniel Jones walks because the 5th-year options decline. The media is sour. The fans are sour. They want a new quarterback. I think he would roll the dice and go to a new team next year either way.
Yeah, I would counter that argument by saying this. You declined his 5th-year option based on his performance so far. You can't invest in Daniel Jones as your franchise quarterback without seeing that he is fully capable of doing that. And I don't think he's shown that so far. So by declining it, you still have the prove it year now in the 4th year, this year, technically. And if he does show out and dominate and prove that he's the guy, you can start negotiating with him for a long-term contract and build around him still. However, there is that big piece of, new coach, new GM. Right. We didn't draft you. You're not our guy. We want to start over with our guy. And I ultimately think that will be the path they take. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to emerge as some superstar this year. I think he's good enough to get them some wins, but I don't think this franchise is going to move forward with Daniel Jones, but he wants to prove this season, at least if he's not going to be with the Giants, that he can get it done with another team as their starting quarterback. And, we'll see how that works out for him. Ultimately, I do think this is his last year in New York because of that situation, though.
Sure, but Daniel Jones is drafted in 2019, right? I'm pretty sure it was 2019. 2018 would have been Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold.
19.
So 2019 would be the Daniel Jones class. Since 2019, the Giants have had 3 head coaches, Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, and now Brian Daboll. This is the 3rd system that Daniel Jones has had to learn.
Yes.
I just don't think he's had a fair shot. But like everybody else, so when I watch Daniel Jones, I do want to see him take charge of the offense. I just feel like there's something not clicking there. Maybe he's not comfortable with the system because it is one and done each year. He's having to learn a new system each year and then unlearn it the next year. Mm-hmm. But there is something lacking there. I don't see him putting the team on his back.
And I will say his weapons are very limited, right? I mean, you got Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney from last year. You don't really know what he is. Sterling Shepard. Yeah, there's a lot of mediocre names.
Kenny Galladay, right. They got some players
Slayton,
there, sure.
Wendell Robinson. These guys have to live up to a bigger potential than they have. Tight end is a mess for them at this point. I don't know that he has the weapons necessarily. They have potential. Like I said, I do think they'll win games and beat teams they're not supposed to beat because they have upside, but they have to show it consistently, and I just don't see that with this team right now.
Fair enough. Then that'll be ongoing throughout the season anyway. More Daniel Jones coverage coming from around the league. Brian Daboll will turn the Giants around. I mean, Brian Daboll, this guy's record is, better than most coaches I've seen, right? You played for Alabama, gets a championship. Obviously, he was on New England staff, gets championships. Probably, I can't see, 2013 to 2016, 3 years with New England. Yeah, they get one every other year, seems like back then. Mm-hmm. Comes to Buffalo, where he's from, and takes over this offense. I'm going to say raises a quarterback and gets this team to a competitive state. They've been in the playoffs the last 3 years at least. Josh Allen goes from just a normal Joe to a superstar. 10 touchdowns his rookie year, 36 last year, went from 2,000 passing yards to 4,000. So Brian Daboll's resume is pretty solid. Yeah, do you think he can turn it around in New York?
He has the proven track record. I do think he will eventually turn this team around. I think he's an excellent candidate to be a head coach and deserved getting the head coach position. He has to show it. We have to see it. But again, the expectations, as I said from the beginning of the Giants talk, are not high this season. Nobody's picking them to win the division. Nobody's picking them to go on a playoff run. This is Brian Daboll's first shot at building his roster and saying, which of these guys are going to stick around and which are we going to replace and start our own regime and start moving forward, just as we did in Buffalo under Sean McDermott and saw that. Now, that being said, there is only one Joshua Patrick Allen in the NFL, right? These guys who come in and grow the way he did, it just doesn't happen. Forever in eternity now, guys are going to be compared to Josh Allen, and that's who we're looking for, the guy we can build into the superstar quarterback who leads the league. But that standard is unreachable and unfair for most quarterbacks coming in. So that's a tough thing. How much of it was Josh Allen? How much of it was Brian Daboll? Certainly Brian Daboll had a part of that. But in Buffalo, certainly being a Bills fan, we know this well, that Daboll took the brunt of a lot of the blame for when things went wrong with the Bills offense in Buffalo. It was, why is Daboll calling plays this way? Why did Daboll do things this way? And it was confusing at times what he was doing. Now, maybe he's learned from that experience and he will grow. Certainly an excellent head coaching candidate. I think he will turn this team around, but it's going to have to take some trust and maybe 3 or 4 years.
Right. This is certainly... I want to say this is the worst roster he's probably had to deal with. I mean, when you're at Alabama, you got players. Mm-hmm, when you're in New England, I think he was running backs coach. They had good running backs, right? Mm-hmm. You go to Buffalo, Josh Allen's one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks to ever play the game, right? I mean, that's nice to work with. That's a nice clay to mold. Again, Saquon Barkley is probably the exception here, but you're just dealing with kind of an average roster. I'm going to say average because I don't think they've been average in the past. I think they are an average roster now with all these top picks that they've had. So this will be one of the bigger challenges for Brian Daboll. If we're just looking at his resume, can you take an average roster to a good roster? That's really the challenge that he has. And really being a proven winner, it doesn't mean anything if you're not the head coach, right?
Yeah, that's right. He has to show he can do it at the helm. And part of that is, I think, building the staff around you who has experience, right? Guys you trust, believe in, and guys who can show you and help you. And I think he has done that on the defensive side of the ball, bringing in Don Martindale, who is, a proven defensive coach with Baltimore many years. And now with the Giants here under Daboll, I think he can bring out the potential that this defense has. You know, we talked about the offensive guys, but Azeez Ojulari now on this team. You know, guys who need to live up to their potential. You know, they had to move on from their excellent cornerback, and unfortunately for them, he went on to a division rival, which I think could, you know, bite them for sure, as we are high on the Eagles, or at least I am. But it starts with both sides of the ball. Brian Daboll is the offensive mind, right? That's where he's always been. Now he's brought in somebody who is that expert on defense to help him lead the way on defense as well. And I think that's an excellent track to take when you're trying to build a team in the right direction. But how long that will take is the question here.
Yes, for sure. Giants over under at 7.5. Again, a tough call. You know, Vegas is so good at this.
That's why
the pressure right on.
That's why they make the bucks, right?
Yes, for sure, for sure. Let's pull up their schedule. I got to do a little analysis for this one.
Tough.
This is a tougher one.
Yeah, if you see the start of their schedule here. I think Tennessee and the Panthers are both competitive games for them. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to win, but they could be 2-0. I probably predictively would say they start 0-2, and then they have a tough game in Dallas. Chicago, an up-and-coming team,
right?
Doing better.
Justin Fields just had 3 touchdowns in the preseason. You know, could he come out and be a better quarterback? I mean, that's, you know, tough games. Then you got Green Bay and London.
Questions.
You know, that's basically a neutral game, right? There's no home court, no field advantage or anything like that. I could see the Giants coming out and either being competitive. Hey, we're all playing for our jobs. We got a new coach. We like our coach. We want to play well for our coach. Or I could see them come out and go 0-5. You're trying to feel your identity out. We don't really know who we are. You know,
but if
our
Saquon
top player's
emerges,
been injured, right? He hasn't been around. So last year we were good at this, but now he's back. So are we this team now? I just think they're going to have some identity issues is my prediction. I'm going to take under 7.5. I'm going to go with 5 wins.
Oh, 5. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely under 7. I probably have them closer to 7, maybe 6. But if you look at the start and end of this schedule, I mean, Minnesota, Indy, Philly to end the season, unless Philly's already locked it up at that last game. You know, they've played Philly twice here toward the end. That's going to be a tough stretch. But in the middle there, they do have Houston and the Lions and Seattle and the Jaguars. So there's some winnable games in there, but I'm still going under 7.5 for the New York Giants, and I'm pretty comfortable with that bet.
Yeah, like I said, I just think maybe they're going to try to force feed Saquon just to try to, you know, hey, this guy's talented. He's drafted high. The expectations are there. You know, I hope they wouldn't do something like that, but I just feel that pressure. You know, the Giants fans are hungry to win. It's been so long for them. And this franchise does have a great history of winning games and being competitive. It's just been so long.
And we'll see how
added pressure, I think, will confuse them.
We'll see how Daboll does with the New York media. You know, if they start 0-5, as we've said they possibly could, that could lead to some unrest there about, is Daboll the right guy to do this? But I think they have to realize where they are in this rebuild process. You know, that's going to be fine. It's fine if they start 0-5. Right. They are learning their identity. As far as I'm concerned, from the outside. But I'm not a Giants fan hoping that they win. So,
well, I mean, it seems like they're in the rebuild every year. But again, this is a rebuild because it's a brand new GM and a brand new coach. It's going to be their first 5 games. So, they should get a little leeway because of that. But again, I think Giants fans are sick and tired of it. This, you know, 3rd year in a row as a rebuild. I mean, it just gets old.
Yeah, I will call it, though. Like I said, 10-point underdog at some point in this year, and they will beat the team that they are the 10-point underdog.
I think they had a couple games like that last season as well. So
that's what they're known for. I think they will do that.
Their roster's much improved on paper. You just got to put it all together. You know, like you said, we're Bills guys, and we love Daboll. You know, we didn't want to see him go, but that's how it goes. He deserves a shot. So anyway, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for tuning in.